The kobza is a Ukrainian folk music instrument of the lute family, a relative of the Central European mandora. The term kobza, however, has also been applied to a number of other Eastern European instruments distinct from the Ukrainian kobza. Construction. The Ukrainian kobza was traditionally gut-strung, lute-like stringed musical instrument with a body hewn from a single block of wood. Instruments with a staved assembly also exist. The kobza has a medium-length neck which may or may not have tied-on frets, which were usually made of gut. It was single-strung and the strings were played with fingertips, or occasionally with a plectrum threaded through a ring placed on the middle finger. History. The term kobza is of Turkic origin and is related to the terms kobuz and kamaz, thought to have been introduced into the Ukrainian language in the 13th century with the migration of a sizable group of Turkic people from Abkhazia settling in the Poltava region. It was usually played by a bard, a minstrel known as a kobzar, who accompanies his recitation of epic poetry called Duma in Ukrainian. The kobza acquired widespread popularity in the 16th century, with the advent of the hetmanate. For the 17th century, the term bandura was often used as a synonym for the kobza. The term bandura has a Latin pedigree and reflects the growing contacts the Ukrainian people had with Western Europe, particularly in the courts of Polish gentry. Ukrainian musicians that found employment at various German courts in the 18th century were called pandorisin. One of these musicians, Tymofiy Kalynskyi, was a lute student of Silvius Leopold Weiss and later became a noted lute virtuoso, a court lutenist, active in Königsberg and St. Petersburg. In the 18th century, the kobza's upper range was extended with an addition of several unstopped treble strings, known as prystrunki, meaning strings on the side, in a psaltery-like setup. In the 20th century, the kobza went into disuse. Currently there is a revival of authentic folk kobza playing in Ukraine, due to the efforts of the Kobza Guild in Kiev and Kharkiv. The kobza revival, however, is impeded by the absence of museum specimens, with the exceptions of a unique surviving 17th-century kobza at the Museum Narodowy in Krakow and a 19th-century kobza, which has been refurbished as a bandura at the Museum of Theatre and Cinematography in Kiev. Almost all evidence is entirely iconographic and some photos from the 19th century. Etymology. The term kobza first appeared in Polish chronicles dating back to 1331 CE. In popular parlance, the term kobza was applied to any regional lute-like instrument used by court musicians in Central Eastern Europe. The term was occasionally used for other musical instruments of several unrelated types. The term kobza was also used in historical sources and folk song as a synonym of bandura in the 19th and early 20th century in Ukraine. The term was occasionally used for the bagpipes and occasionally for the hurdy-gurdy in eastern Poland, Belarus and the Volyn region in Ukraine. The unfretted starosvitska bandura, a variant of gusli, developed California. 1700 appropriated the bandura name, but was commonly referred to as a kobza, because of the name's historical cachet, while the Romanian kobza is a different type of plucked lute. Other instruments known as kobza. The term kobza was also used as a synonym in historical sources for bandura in the 19th and early 20th century in Ukraine, and was even used for bagpipes and occasionally for the hurdy-gurdy in eastern Poland, Belarus and the Volyn region in Ukraine. Eventually the unfretted starosvitska bandura appropriated the bandura name, but was commonly referred to as a kobza, because of the name's historical cachet. The Romanian kobza is a different type of plucked lute. The modern Ukrainian kobza. There are currently two different approaches to kobza construction: authentic fretless reconstructions, produced by adherents for the recreation of authentic folk traditions, and modern stylized fretted instruments based on a modified domra design. Today there have been no attempts to reconstruct early fretted kobza of the 18th century. The fretless kobza. The Kobza Ostap Verasay is today considered the foremost kobza player of the 19th century, despite the fact that he referred to his instrument as a bandura. He was a representative of the playing tradition, stopping the strings along the neck but without frets. Verasay's instrument, often today referred to as traditional kobza, had 6 single unstopped strings mounted along the treble side of the instrument and 6 stoppable strings strung along the neck. The strings strung along the neck and side are plucked by the right hand, with the left hand stopping the strings on the fingerboard. After Verasay's death in 1890, the instrument fell into disuse until its revival in the 1980s by Mykola Bunik, and exemplified by such players as Volodymyr Kushpet, Taras Kompanechenko, Eduard Drak, and Jurij Fedinskij. The modern fretted kobza. A fretted version of the kobza was used by Paul Konoplenko Zaporozhets, who recorded a disc of kobza music for folkways. Konoplenko first picked up the fretted kobza before the revolution in 1917 in Kiev from Vasyl Potapenko, and played on this instrument after emigrating to Winnipeg, Canada. Konoplenko's instrument had 8 strings strung along the neck and 4 treble strings strung on the soundboard. The tuning used was reminiscent to that of the 7-string Russian guitar tuning. Fretted kobzas were also developed by Mykola Prokopenko, who wrote a PhD dissertation in 1976 on his efforts to reconstruct and resurrect the fretted kobza. Prokopenko suggested that the 4-string domra, an instrument widely taught in music schools in Ukraine but considered a Russian folk instrument but actually not used in Russia, be replaced by the fretted kobza. Although Prokopenko's suggestion was not supported in 1976, it is currently being resurrected by musicians in Ukraine in the academic folk instrument movement, particularly at the Kiev Conservatory. Orchestral kobza, with 4 strings tuned in fifths using tunings that parallel those used by the instruments of the violin family. The instruments are made in prima, alto and tenor and contrabass sizes. Accompaniment kobza, usually having 6 or 7 strings and a fretted neck. The 6-string version uses standard guitar tuning. The 7-string version uses a Russian guitar tuning. Gallery. Additional informations. References. Bibliography. Dyakowski, M. A note on the history of the bandura. The Annals of the Ukrainian Academy of Arts and Sciences in the U.S. 4, 3-4, 1419, NY 1958, 2122. Dyakowski, M.J. The Bandura. The Ukrainian Trend, 1958, I. 18-36. Dyakowski, M. Anyone can make a bandura. I did. The Ukrainian Trend, Volume 6. Haydamakar, L. Kobza bandura, national Ukrainian musical instrument. Guitar Review, 33, Summer 1970. Mishlo, V. A brief description of the Zinkiv method of bandura playing. Bandura, 1982, 2/6, 23-26. Mishlo, V. A short history of the bandura. Eastern European Meetings in Ethnomusicology, 1999. Romanian Society for Ethnomusicology, Volume 6, 69-86. Mizinak, V. Folk Instruments of Ukraine. Bede Books, Melbourne, Australia, 1987-48. Cherkassky, L. Ukrainsky Narodny Muzikny Instrumenti. Technica, Kiev, Ukraine, 2003 to 262 pages.